Mm. Welcome to the Books Between Friends podcast.
3 lifelong friends,
one shared obsession.
Books.
from epic fantasy to page-turning thrillers.
We dive into the stories we love
and the ones we just can't stop talking about.
So take a seat,
grab a drink,
and get cozy.
Okay, because
it's American
who
Ninja.
was it that fell?
Time.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you can actually die.
Nobody saves you. You don't go into the
Right.
water.
You don't fall into a mud pit. You fall out of the sky.
Welcome back, friends. We're so excited to dive into our first book today. We will be doing a full recap of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros.
Yeah, and we're excited to do so. So Fourth Wing was our choice, and Fourth Wing is incredibly popular. So naturally, we're going to talk about it. And it has dragons, so we're going to talk about it some more. So so we hope you enjoy this episode, and let's dive into it.
Okay, so to start off, as Ethan said, we're going to be talking about, in this episode, recapping Fourth Wing. As we go through this, we're assuming if you're listening to this that you've already read the book. So fair warning, there will be spoilers throughout this episode. So if you haven't read it yet, go read it and then come back to us.
Yes.
So to summarize the book, the way I would summarize it to someone is the setting is Vizcaya War College, where students of the Riders Quadrant face death every single day while they're training to become dragon riders. Our main character is Violet Sorrengail, who was forced into the Riders Quadrant by her cold and cruel mother, General Lilith Sorrengail, who also just happens to be the commander of Vizcaya War College. Violet's older siblings were also riders who trained all of their life to be dragon riders and enter the Riders Quadrant, just like their mother. But Violet had been training all her life to be a scribe, like their dad, up until 6 months ago when their dad died, and Lilith decided that Violet would be going into the Riders Quadrant instead. On top of just the regular everyday trials of potential deaths at school, Violet is also going to have to watch her back for several other students who are called the Marked Ones, who want revenge for their parents who were sentenced to death by General Sorrengail for their involvement in the Tyrish Rebellion, especially Xaden Ryerson, the son of Fen Ryerson, who was the leader of the rebellion. Xaden is a third-year wing leader who is bonded to the powerful dragon Sigale and is known for his own power of wielding shadows. This book brings dragons. It has dangerous but sexy shadow daddies, crazy twists at the end. What more could you ask for?
So I'm going to kick off our discussion here by just giving some initial thoughts on the book. I guess you can consider me the reason why Fourth Wing was brought upon this group to discuss. So I guess I saw Fourth Wing being talked about on Book Talk as part of my endless scrolling at night that usually keeps me up for hours when I really should be sleeping. And it intrigued me automatically because, as I said in the first episode, I love anything dragons. It was very deceptive to me, the cover of the book, because I was like, this is very young adult. It looks like this cover looks young adult. And that is primarily the genre and age group that I read is young adult, because I'm, just this inner child, right? To my surprise, it is not young adult at all. Many a blushing moment for me. But no, I really enjoyed this book. But it is a hot take, though, because as probably in the first chapter, I almost DNF'd this book and put it on the shelf and let dust collect on it. I thought some of the beginning parts of the first chapter were a little ridiculous, and then we can get into some of that a little later. But then I heard on Book Talk, give it a couple chapters to get it going. And so I did, and I'm glad I did because I was riveted throughout the whole book. Couldn't really put it down. I I love to read, but I'm generally a slow reader. And for me to not put a book down is a big deal. And so those are some of my initial thoughts. I loved the magic system. I loved, of course, the dragons. I always love when a dragon is a friend or rather than a monster that you have to kill to get the girl or to get the princess at the end, right? So yeah, those are some of my initial thoughts. Jen, what about you?
Yeah. So I was honestly, when Ethan told me about this book, I was in the middle of leaving my job. So I was literally about to have a lot of free time. And until at least I found my next job. But he told me about it and I remember exactly what he said to me because it like for whatever reason it grabbed my attention because he's recommended books to me all the time. Like he'll tell me, "Hey, read this book. Hey, this one was good. Hey, this was good." But the way he said it, I'm like, I believe him. I need to get this now. But he said, do yourself a favor and go read Fourth Wing. It is it is one of the best books I have read in a long time. And I was at that moment kind of going through like a non-reading moment in my life just because like as I said, I was just very, very busy in my job as an assistant principal. And so I didn't really have free time to just kind of sit and read. I was just always really tired when I got home. And so when he said that, I was like, you know what? Yes, I went literally the same day. I grabbed the book, I took a picture, and I sent it to him. I was like, look, I got the book. And so I immediately started. And I remember him telling me that he kind of had a hard time in the beginning, but I didn't. I was immediately drawn into the book. And when I think back to what brings me joy when it comes to reading and what kind of stories kind of like attract me, I don't want to have to work through the book. Like there's a lot of fantasy books that have a lot of world building, which I can appreciate because I know the author did a really great job like thinking through these built like these worlds. And so I get that and I can appreciate it. But if I have to kind of work for a story where I have to figure out what's going to happen, to me, it's just not going to be one of those things where I'm going to put a lot of time into it. And so to me, Fourth Wing was one of those stories that I just was immediately like I could imagine myself at Best Guy at Fourth College, and I knew I wasn't going to survive if I ever went there. So it was just it was interesting to see how they were going to create this character. Like, were they going to make her into like this epic hero from like day one, or was she going to struggle just like any average person was going to struggle? So that kind of was like, I wonder what her journey is going to be in this quadrant because she wasn't meant to be in this quadrant. And so that just got me from the beginning. So I can't wait to tell you more about what I thought about specific characters. Steph, what did you think of the book?
So I actually remember hearing about this book from like several different sources. And so it had been on my radar for a little while. I also was not really in much of like a reading moment in my life at that time when I kept hearing about it. But Jen and I read Sarah J. Maas books together. I want to say like spring through summer of last year. And this was one of the books that she mentioned I should also read. And again, it had already been on my radar. I knew that it was probably going to be right up my alley because of the dragons. And so I decided, I knew that Onyx Storm was going to be coming out January this year, 2025. So I didn't want to read the first two books too early and have too much of a gap in between those two and the third book. So I decided I would read it like in late 2024. And I went through my text messages to like put my thoughts together about these books. And I realized that I actually started reading this book on my birthday last year in November of 2024 because I had like the whole week off. And that's when I decided I was going to start reading this book. And I texted you about it, Jen. I was like, okay, finally, I'm reading it. And she asked me, like, what are your initial thoughts? And I was like, holy crap, this is so violent. And what made me say that is really early on, one of the characters that Violet meets for the first time right before going into Beskaya died right away. And that kind of set the tone for the whole rest of the series, really. At any point in time, whether it's like just through the crazy trials that these students are put through, or someone might be right around the corner trying to kill you if you're Violet. Death is just always lingering as like, you know, a character of this book, of this whole series. So I think that's what intrigued me most about it, is just how, you know, the tone was set from the jump.
So now we're going to get into some in-depth discussion and talk about some of our favorite moments and some of our not so favorite moments. So let's get into that. I will say, like, for me, I really did like the first thing I thought was, okay, this girl is about to go into this quadrant that's meant for like badass people. Like, I hate to say that, but it was meant for badass people, and she's not one of those badass people. And I kind of felt for her and I said, okay, is the author going to make this girl like an automatic hero where it's like, oh, she rose to the occasion every single time? Or is she going to make her like what she's describing her as like a weak person that's going to persevere at the end? You know, like I was really curious as to what was going to happen because Biscayas just sounds very brutal, you know, like you said, Steph. And so that was my first thought going into that. And then it just kind of didn't stop for me. Like it was just like one thing after another. And, you know, it was kind of all building up, especially once they crossed that parapet. And so for her to have to do that on one shoe that was slippery and the other one that wasn't in the middle of a storm, I'm just like, oh, like I felt anxiety for her. And I wasn't even the one crossing the parapet. And I was just like, oh my God.
Totally. I also felt like, yeah, this could go to, you know, one of two ways, like you mentioned, Jen. Like either she's just gonna like crash and burn immediately, or she's gonna, like you said, rise to the occasion. And I honestly appreciate the way that she's written and that she's really resilient. I feel like she has her own brand of strength that is really, what do I say, like underappreciated, and people underestimate her a lot, but I think she's a lot stronger than even she gives herself credit for sometimes. And you know, her best friend Rhiannon sees it in her. I think Xaden sees it in her. And like I think this is also a story of her coming into her power. So I appreciate that about this character.
I hate to say that I was one of the ones who like definitely underestimated her. And I hate to say that, but you know, it's just one of those initial reactions. I can appreciate her now as a character. Like I love Violet. I think she's amazing. I definitely in the beginning wasn't like, what's gonna happen with this girl?
No, I mentioned earlier that I almost DNF'd this book, and it's because like of the first chapter, right? Like first couple of chapters, automatically it's high stakes. You can tell that from chapter one, line one, literally high stakes when she's crossing the parapet. But it's because of those high stakes that I almost DNF'd it. I'm like, this is a war college. Obviously, like people are going to die, but
Mhm.
do they need to die on day one? Like that seems kind of counterintuitive, right? We're trying to build up our numbers, yet if you die, you die. So sorry.
Yeah.
Like you're just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're just added to the death list. So it made it seem because the high stakes and because it was so like hard hitting that that's the tone that Rebecca Yarros wanted to create.
Mhm.
But to me, it started leaning into a little bit of the over the top dramatic, almost like, line one of Twilight, where Bella says, "I never given much thought to how I die." Right? Like it had that similar
So
tone for me.
melodramatic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, kept on reading, loved Violet, honestly, just with, to your point, Steph, like just how resilient she actually
Mhm.
is. And how she just finds opportunity. No, that's why I almost DNF'd it, but I'm glad I didn't. But
Did
yeah,
you not
it's
watch Game of Thrones?
yeah, of
Oh,
course I do. Who are you talking
well,
to? Yeah.
you. The only reason I say that is because, man, Game of Thrones was like violent from the beginning. Do you think if did you
Yeah.
read the books or did you just watch like go straight into the show?
I read the first one. I read it before I started watching the series because I knew I wanted to watch the series. But
Okay.
after I watch a movie or watch a series, it's very hard for me to go back and read the book. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't separate that in my brain.
Just
It's funny
curious.
because I do that. I actually do that often. I'll like watch a show or a movie that I'm like, this feels like a great book. And then I'll look it up and be like, oh, it is based on a book. And then I go and read it and I'm like, love it.
I only brought it up because you said that you almost DNF'd it because of how like violent it was, right? And so or no, not violent. What did you say?
Not necessarily because the violence. Violence I could do all day long, right? Like I do
Mm.
like Game of Thrones, and it is violent. Like on like the first page of Game of Thrones, like they set you up for what you can expect
Yeah.
throughout the whole series.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
No, the part about Fourth Wing is that is like really over dramatic, like over the top.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I thought it was young adult, because I was like, oh, this is very angsty, like teen,
Yeah.
like it's all about woe is me and I have to do this now when I
Yeah.
wanted to do this.
But I feel like that's
So
more high school, and this is college age, right? And I actually appreciated the
Mhm.
fact that it was college age, and that actually brought me into the story a little closer too. It's like, oh, this is a little more believable as far as to what they're feeling and stuff because they are in their
Mhm.
20s. And I feel like in your 20s, you kind of are going through all these emotions,
Yeah.
whether you're in a high stakes college or not, like you're going through tons of emotions. And so I appreciated that the author made them that age. And it was kind of hard to even think about this as a college just because we had our own college experience. And it's like, man, I
It's
don't see
completely
this as a
different.
college at all. Like, I know you're going to classes and stuff and you have to quote unquote graduate, but it doesn't feel like a college. Like, where do they go to high
I
school?
feel like that's
That's kind of
kind
what
of
I
the
want to
point
know.
too, though, is like these, I mean, honestly, they're still kind of immature and still becoming adults, but they're also being thrown into a war college where there's a real war and they could actually die. So I
Yeah.
think that that just juxtaposition was on purpose
Yeah.
for the
yeah,
story.
No, I love the beginning. It was really great. I will say that like hearing her kind of struggle through how she feels about being in the writer's quadrant, knowing that she needed to or wants to be at the scribe quadrant, like that was
Hmm.
interesting also to read just kind of like her feelings through all that and like, should I stay? Should I go? Because at the time, like her best friend, Dane, was trying to get her to leave and join the scribe quadrant and behind, her mother's back. And so like to me, that was interesting that she didn't immediately go so that kind of shows like her bravery too. And
Well, I kind of got the sense that she really wanted to kind of prove herself, maybe to her mother, maybe to herself, and even her siblings, like she she didn't seem as eager as Dane was to get her out of the writer's quadrant. And I feel like she secretly thought, I want to do this, even though she had been training her whole life to do something completely the opposite.
I really like that she admitted how scared she was.
Yeah.
I mean, she was scared. Like after barely making it through parapet, she was fearful the entire time. But I do enjoy the fact that she didn't let that fear cripple her at all. Actually, she's very intelligent. She's very clever. And so I feel like that cleverness is kind of what got her through a lot of those big moments where she could have easily died. And so I really do like that about Violet.
So I do want to talk about the tree scene
Oh,
where she
actually,
was
yeah,
like
let's talk about that.
oh
climbing.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So this is early on, like maybe like a couple days after they made it through the parapet. She realizes that she's not strong enough to really spar with all of these other kids who are stronger than her, have better battle tactics than her. And so she realizes she's going to have to poison these kids, the people that she's being matched up against, so that she can actually beat them and have a chance to make it through school. So that was the first thing that showed her cleverness. Again, I mentioned earlier, I feel like she has her own like brand of strength that people underestimate a lot. And this is one of them. I mean, it's so smart to figure out how or who she's going to be matched up against. And then she has to size them up to make sure she poisons them just enough so that they can still spar, but not enough to where it's obvious that they've been poisoned. So I think that's funny, so clever, and really interesting of her to do. But anyway, so at one point, she's climbing a tree to get something to poison whoever her next opponent is going to be. And she accidentally overhears a group of the marked ones meeting. And part of the story is that It's actually against the law for more than three of them to meet at any one point in time. And I think at this point there was like seven or more meeting. And she knows immediately because she's also, a scribe, which they know all the rules and the laws of Nevers. So she knows that it's illegal for them to be meeting right now, but she decides not to do anything about it. She stays in the tree, she stays quiet. It's also probably partially because any one of them, let alone seven of them, could kill her in a heartbeat. And so she stays hidden in the tree. And then right afterwards, what I thought was really interesting is that she thought she was in the clear once they disbanded. And she climbed out of the tree, but then Xaden caught her. But he chose to believe that she wasn't going to do anything about it. Obviously, that's an
I
Easter egg for later on. We find out why he knew he could trust her. But I think that's important to their relationship, you know?
Mhm.
I thought it was funny that she made the joke about the perfume. She's like, "Was it my perfume that gave me away?" And he was like, "Yes, I wield shadows, but yes, it was your perfume." I was like, that was funny.
Yeah.
Because even in that moment, like she knew she was kind of screwed because it's like, here's
Yeah.
Xaden, Finn Ryerson's son, who hates her, literally could kill her and nobody know about it. And even through the fear, she still made a joke. Like it just kind of shows more of her character there too. But yeah, I mean, I agree that that was a huge pivotal moment in their relationship because she just straight up asked him, like, aren't because doesn't she throw a dagger at his head?
Was it that scene? I think that might have been a later scene.
I'm pretty sure she
Yeah.
did. She threw a dagger at his head, and
Okay.
then I think that's when he said, "Aren't you a violent little thing?" or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah.
Ugh, that is
That
like
was
my
the first
least
time.
favorite line out of the whole thing.
Really?
Aren't you? Yes, because I think it's
Hot
so
take, because
cheesy.
everybody loves that line.
I know, and it's like because it's on all the bookmarks. It's like on the
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
dust jacket on the back. But no, it is. And when he calls her violence,
Yeah.
It's
like
a cute
to
nickname.
me, like, oh, I'm gonna call her Violet, so that way he can use a pet name of Violence for her. Like that's what it made me feel like. That may not
Yeah.
have been the thought process at all.
It's
But
corny. Yes, it's corny.
yeah. Like I feel like I'm coming out with a lot of cons, but I love the book. I
Yeah.
No,
promise.
that was a great moment between them because, like Steph said, like, he chooses to believe her and trust her because I mean, this is a huge secret that could literally get all the marked ones executed, not just kicked out of the college, like literally executed. They're all dead, and so chooses to trust her, and she chooses to trust him too. In turn, like
Yeah.
she's obviously also alone and could be killed at any moment and she trusts him anyways. And so just kind of like that right there was the start of and then doesn't she like just straight up ask like, "Are you gonna kill me today?" And he's like, "I don't know, I haven't decided yet." And so to
Yeah,
me
I think she like asked him a few times like throughout. And I think it's funny because up until this moment, everything you've read about Xaden is like he's so violent, he's so powerful, he's so scary. And he
well he
shows
is.
mercy for no reason to like
Yeah.
his number one enemy, you know? So I think that complicates that whole dynamic. And so it sets it up for an interesting
Well,
story.
especially because her first thought when she sees Xaden is doesn't she say he's like the most beautiful man or male she's ever
Yeah.
seen, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So immediately as she's describing him, I close my eyes. I'm like, okay, come to me. What do you look like? I need to see what
The man
Xaden
ever.
looks like. Why is he the most beautiful man?
Right.
And so then you have this picture in your
He's like
head every time
dark
you're
and
reading.
mysterious. Yeah.
He's
Yes.
Rhysand. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
he's Rhysand, yes. Just without the wings. I really do love that moment because I just further complicates everything going up to
Mhm.
the gauntlet and threshing and just some of those big moments where Violet feels like she needs to consistently prove herself and consistently try to stay alive, and so he kind of comes into play to all those moments as well.
Yeah, I like that moment specifically because you get to see Xaden in this completely different light over what he's been portrayed as, right? Because you can automatically tell that he's like this, not father figure, but at least big brother figure to all of these marked ones, right? Like you can tell that, oh, there's more. to this story already than what Violet's been told. And I think that's something that Rebecca Yarros does really incredibly well, is keeps us in the dark in a lot of the things that she writes until the moment when it makes the biggest impact. And like there's other moments in the story that we can talk about later, but it doesn't feel like she's lying to you like some authors will do. Like all of a sudden there's this big reveal and it makes no sense to the rest of the story.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I don't feel that with this story.
Right. She does drop like little moments here and there where you do pick up his character and you do pick up what kind of person he
Yeah.
is. I mean, who takes the time to check in on the younger writers? Who takes the time to make sure they're okay and they're, receiving the help that they need to be able to survive, because he knows what's at stake. And he also does it with like a no bullshit attitude. Like, yes, I'm here for you. And yes, I want you
Yeah.
to live. But if you can't help yourself, I can't do that for you either,
Yeah.
He's very pragmatic.
So I agree, Ethan. I appreciate that. You do kind of pick up on where his character is going to go instead of just having like, oh, just kidding. He's actually a good guy.
The next big thing for me, I think, was Gauntlet. So Xaden kind of helps her out by saying that whole thing, the right way is not the only way. So she figures it out. She chooses to use a dagger to help her get up that ramp at the end. And then Morgan, who's a goody two shoes or whatever, she cares so much about doing things the right way. Amber. Yeah.
Yes.
I always want to call her Morgan. Amber, she always wants to do things the right way. So she tries to get her disqualified afterwards. And Xaden put her in her place and like shut her down immediately. But then that matters later because of what happened after threshing.
This is where you show a lot of Xaden's character too, is like he's trying to help her live. And, you kind of start seeing where the moments shift away from him trying to kill her to, or him being, this like feared guy, and actually turns into someone who is helpful.
And this is just also another moment where she really doesn't measure up to everybody else in school, right? Like everybody else is like, yeah, maybe they need to practice a little bit more or, eventually they'll get it. But like she physically cannot do this.
Yeah.
And can't figure out a way to like get around it. Everything else she's been able to figure out how to get around it through her wit, through her intelligence. But this one is just really stumping her. And it took Xaden to let her know, like, it's okay to think outside of the box on this one. And she did, and she figured it out. She may not physically stand up to everybody else who is able to just like run up that ramp, but she figured out a way to do it.
Yeah.
And so that it's just an interesting way to pose, like, even if you're differently abled than some, it's not like you can't do certain things that everybody else seems to be able to do.
When I first was reading like her having to practice on this gauntlet thing, in my head, I was picturing like a big tower for whatever reason. Like I was picturing this huge tower where it had like several levels of like things you had to get through. And I don't know why, like that was what I pictured it, but it's more than just that. And I was just like, no, that's not the gauntlet.
It's like an obstacle course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys ever watch that show, American Ninja Warrior? Yes. That's exactly what I had in my head. And there's actually like a ramp at the end of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's super steep. So I was just like, basically, she needs to get through American Ninja Warrior.
But isn't it like on a cliff or something? Like, isn't that where?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like,
it's American
who
Ninja
was it
Warrior,
that fell?
Like,
but like you can actually die.
Nobody saves you. You don't go into the water.
You don't fall into a mud pit. You fall out of the sky.
But yes, I was just picturing in my head something way smaller than what this is. And so you're right. You're right. Like this is the first time where Violet has to figure out how to get through that. And I love that Xaden is the one that gives her the confidence to think outside the box, like you said. And so this is kind of where I started leaning more towards, I really like Xaden. I like him for what he's doing. I like that he's boosting her confidence, like not trying to be overprotective like Dane was doing. He's
No,
boosting
yeah.
her
Like he
confidence.
knows that she's fully capable
Exactly. Like
and
talking her
just
through
needs
it.
to, yeah.
And I loved it. And so whenever she finally did it, I was really happy for her. And I think this is also where it turned it around for me too on like how I felt about Violet. I was like, you know what? I think she'll survive.
This is the moment where I'm like, oh, okay, so clearly this is the turning point for the enemies to lovers narrative, you know?
I don't think to me this was a
Yes.
turning point for them. I think this was like building like building a friendship to me. But I think like a huge turning point comes later when we'll talk on that later. But to me, this wasn't the turning point for them. That's
Yeah,
just me
I
though.
think this moment of this series, I was like, obviously, Violet and Xaden are going to be a thing, right? Like, I knew that at the
Yeah.
beginning of the book. Everyone does, but at the same time, this is also a moment where, to the point, like Violet is still a little iffy towards Xaden, but because of that, I was like, I know they're going to be together, but also, is he trying to purposefully like plant seeds of doubt against
Mm,
Dane, right? Like, is
Mm.
there something nefarious
yeah.
here happening? Like, that's not the theory that I ultimately believed, right? But it couldn't stop the little seeds of doubt in my brain.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I obviously knew they were going to be a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody who knew this book was enemies to lovers knew that
Yeah.
they were going to be the thing. Like my sister is 10 chapters in and she knows they're going to be a thing. So
Right.
she's like, I just feel like she's going to go for Xaden. I was like, I don't know.
Also, she can't stop talking about how attractive she finds him,
Yes,
so
she does. Yeah,
that
she
might have
does talk
given it
about that a
away.
lot.
Yeah, the first line she says about Xaden, like, he's the most beautiful man.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Every
Um,
every other thought from her when it comes to Xaden is like, oh, he's about to kill me. Oh, he's so hot.
Yeah. He's walking
you're
gorgeously
so
towards me with the dagger. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
so right, dude. You're
In the
so
hottest
right. He
way.
really does. I love her thoughts on Xaden, to be honest, because they just get so
Even his shadow is hot. Yeah.
Yep.
man. But threshing is where I think that's. I mean, obviously from the beginning I was hooked, like I said, but I think threshing is the point where I
Yeah.
couldn't put it down anymore. I was like, okay, now we really need to figure out what's going to happen because so much happened in threshing, and I
Yeah.
don't even know where to start.
Well, I think that's a good point though, because I was right, like Steph and I, we love dragons. And I was like, where are the dragons? I want the dragons.
Yeah.
It took so long to get to that point. That was a slow burn in and of itself. Like to finally
Right.
get to that point. And when that moment gets there, that was the moment that I was like, oh, okay, this really is unputdownable. Like I need to go
Yes.
more. Now that the
Mhm.
dragons are finally here, I'm in this thing.
You're right. No, there wasn't that much talk on dragons. I mean, they knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about that. That's a slow burn in itself. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it had you like building up to when are the dragons coming. So
Mhm.
yeah, I do like that.
Totally. Like day one, they're there like after Parapet for a little bit, just the ones that agreed to bond that year. And then you don't see them again until like this is about like halfway through the book,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah,
Until
Yeah.
yeah. Threshing,
threshing.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
actually there's that one scene beforehand presentation after Gauntlet, but that was
Right.
like a quick scene.
right.
But yeah, it took several chapters in between to get to the actual dragons.
I thought it was interesting like the way threshing starts is that nobody can intervene if anything happens.
Mhm.
And so this is like another point that Ethan was saying, like, you know, you go there to die and that's it, pretty much. You're just killing off
Yeah.
all these people. And so threshing is like nobody can intervene no matter what's happening. And to me, that was
Mhm.
interesting that that was a rule. Like, why would they make that a rule? I mean, I understand that you need to be strong enough to bond a dragon. And if you don't
Yeah.
bond, then you're not meant to be a writer. So I kind of get that.
Mhm.
But I didn't realize just how, I guess, like lonely they were when it came to having to bond a dragon, right?
And what's crazy is that the way they set it up is almost like this is a purge day for them too. Like
Yeah.
anything goes, no one's going to intervene. So if you want to kill someone besides trying to bond a dragon, have at it. And so that's scary for Violet because she has so many people who have reason to want to kill her, you know?
Yeah.
Didn't y'all
Enter
feel?
Jack.
Oh my God, Jack. Oh.
Jack freaking Barlow.
I feel
Oh
like that should be
The
man.
like the
worst.
tagline for this episode. Jack frickin' Barlow.
Honestly, that wouldn't be a bad time for it. I was just about to say, didn't y'all feel when they were doing presentation and like they talked about the golden dragon, didn't y'all feel like immediately
Mhm.
that there was going to be something big about her? Like
Oh,
obviously,
for
right? She's
sure.
golden,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just like, is
That
that
And
gonna
was
like just the way every other writer seemed to be disgusted by her small stature and underestimated her. Obviously, we see a lot of parallels between her and Violet.
right, right, right.
Clearly, they were setting that up for Violet to be the one to bond and Darna, you know?
yeah.
I just thought, is this like a too obvious kind of scene where it's like we know she's gonna bond with this golden dragon, you know?
Yeah. Well, because
Yeah.
they had
It was
also
kind of
talked
obvious.
about right, it was, but they had also talked about like the big black dragon too. And so my thought going into that was like, all right, are we going for the irony here? Like big
Mm,
black dragon bonds with Violet. Never would I have thought that both of them would have
yeah.
bonded. So I think
Yeah, we're doing
Rebecca
both.
Yarros was probably very purposeful in that, like, I'm
Yeah.
going to throw them on the scent over here. I'm going to throw them on the scent over here. But surprise, it's both. Like,
I
Well, do y'all remember, or am I remembering this wrong? Like, Taryn wasn't one of the ones who had agreed to bond that year,
yes, he
right?
didn't
correct.
agree to
That is
Like,
bond.
he
correct. Yeah.
wasn't at
Yeah.
presentation. He wasn't at that first day after Parapet. Like,
Nobody had seen him for a
he,
while.
Right.
yeah, he was not thought to be one of the dragons bonding that year. And
Yes.
so he decided to, like, at the last minute during threshing.
See, that's why I didn't really pay attention. Like, yes, it got brought up. I knew that. And I know Jack was like the one who was like lusting after him, right? And so I
Yeah.
thought that maybe that's kind of where it was going to go. But I knew he wasn't one that was going to be, or he wasn't one that had agreed to bond. And so I didn't think it was going to go
Okay.
that way. I really did think it was going to be the obvious choice of like, oh, you have this little dragon for this little writer who is
Yeah.
going through, all of this. Like people were talking bad about Violet as they were talking bad about, the golden dragon. And so I was like, they're clearly gonna bond. Like, when is it gonna
Yeah.
happen? And so yeah, I thought that whenever they did both and whenever she said that it like once she gave the name of both dragons and then she said like everything went into complete chaos, like I could hear the chaos in my head as like people were screaming
Yeah.
because it's like this is unheard of. Nobody's done this before.
No. Yeah.
And I could hear all the screaming in my head. I'm like, what? What? Two dragons? What is going on here?
Can we rewind for a second though? Because I do want to talk about the scene where so she overhears Jack and the other guys
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about wanting to take out Andarna during
Mhm.
threshing. And so she goes and tries to save her or like warn her to fly away. And I thought it was so funny that Andarna was like, whatever. She didn't even pay attention to her. She was just like, whatever, didn't fly away. And it was hilarious to me, at least, when Violet was like, "Oh my God, you can't fly!" Like shit. She thought she couldn't fly, but Andarna just wouldn't go. But then, like, she still takes on like what was it, like 3 or 4 guys, even though like
Um,
obviously she's no match against them.
3? It was 3 of them.
3. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 3
Yeah.
guys, yeah. And then Zayden almost intervenes at this point. So again, we have Zayden for whatever reason, like at this point, we still think they're enemies, right? Quote unquote.
hmm
But for whatever reason, he still seems to want her to live and not die. Like it would, if you actually saw her as an enemy at this point, it would be so easy to just let her die. But why did he hesitate and almost intervene?
I knew at that moment
So,
his feelings for her were strong. I knew that, and how she was
yeah,
doubting it too in her head. I'm like, dude, how do you not see that he has feelings for you? Like he literally almost
right.
broke Codex and helped you because you were in danger.
Yeah. And then sidebar to just like shout out, I loved how Jack ran away like a bitch after she stabbed him with one of her daggers.
Yes, that was a good moment.
because
That was
Jack
so
ain't
good.
shit.
He
That's
acted like
why.
such a baby after that. Oh my
Oh
God.
God, yes. I know. But then didn't no, Taryn killed one of them.
And then it
Right?
comes back and
Quadrant.
bites her in the ass afterwards
Oh,
because
dude,
Orin was one of the ones who broke into her dorm.
that was a huge moment. Again,
Yeah.
well, I'm sure we all do, right? We all imagine like the scenes in our heads, but I was just living through that whole scene and like her struggle
Right.
of trying to stay alive with all these people. And so I was just like, my heart was racing. I remember my heart was racing so fast because I'm like, this is it. Like they get her. Cause I mean, she was
Yeah.
so outmatched. And I was like, no, I was like, she can't go like this. Like, what?
Yeah.
We can't build up this
Well,
character for her to die like this.
well, I'm going to backtrack this back to threshing one more time just because. Okay, right afterwards, you remember Dane confronted Xaden about almost intervening?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Xaden asked him, "Oh, well, would you break the rules to save Violet,
Oh,
your best friend?" And Dane said nothing. I feel like that
Oof.
was obviously like leading up until this point, Dane kept trying to pressure her to leave the writer's quadrant. And I think that that was like rubbing her the wrong way. Like he was underestimating her power or her strength, whatever you want to call it. And she really felt like she wanted to prove herself. But this moment, I think, was the first turning point for Dane and violence,
so you call her violence
Violet
too.
relationship or friendship, you know? Like, I think that broke something in them, or at least for Violet, you know?
But
Because she kind of dwelled on that for a second. And, Xaden was willing to intervene there before Taryn came through, but Dane clearly would not have.
but
So, what does that say about their friendship?
she still defended him.
Yeah, but I think that that still like
It
did
was like
something
a crack in
for
the
their
armor. Like
friendship.
it was the
Yes.
beginning of
Yeah.
like a untethering of their relationship. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. And then whenever she shows up, on her dragon and he runs to her and is like really excited and then kisses her and she's like, I feel nothing.
That was so cringy. Yeah, that was such a
Yeah.
cringy moment. Oh.
I know.
And
I
then
felt for that too. I was just like, oh God, she hated that, I bet. And then exactly what she
yeah,
said. She
she
like did
felt
not feel
nothing.
anything. Yeah. Especially after he just admitted that he would never break codex to help her or save her. Like, why would you want to
Exactly.
be
That's what I'm
kissed?
saying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, dude, who do you think you are?
Yeah. So anyway, she bonds two dragons, the biggest and the smallest. Crazy.
Yes.
But that puts another target on her back because now all of these other first years who didn't bond want to potentially kill her for the chance to bond the biggest dragon.
And
So,
that also caused this whole dynamic within their friend group because now the marked ones feel like they need to protect her because Violet's dragon is mated to Zayden's dragon. And so now
right, yeah.
their lives are tethered together. And
Mhm.
so if something happens to Violet, then potentially something can happen to Xaden. And so now all of a sudden she has this other friend group that's looking out for her, even though that's not what she asked for. But because she does become the target number one after bonding the biggest dragon. And so I thought that was like I really like seeing that whole friendship dynamic kind of change after Threshing too, because a
Mhm.
lot did change.
So, like, she's target number one because everybody wants Taryn. And so one night she gets attacked in the middle of her sleep. Someone let a group of unbonded, I guess, first years
Mhm.
into her dorm and they all try to kill her.
And there was like how many, what, like 5, 6 of them
Six.
there?
I think it was six.
Six.
Yeah.
Yeah, six is the number that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
knew
think
she
it was
was
six.
definitely outmatched. And she was sleeping,
Mhm.
right? They did it. And that's against Codex.
Yeah.
Like, you can't
Yeah.
attack a
Right.
writer
Yeah.
when they're asleep.
Right. So six of them break into her dorm. This is also the moment when we find out Andarna can stop time. It was a
Oh,
huge moment.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because right
Yeah, that was a
before
cool moment.
was about to, I think, slit her throat or
Yeah.
kill her,
Yeah.
she stops time. And then that gave Xaden enough time to get to her dorm or something, right?
Because
Yeah.
he was
Or he
already
was
on his
already at
way.
the doorway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was on his way and he was at the doorway. Yeah.
That's right. She
So
stops
anyway,
time. And the
yeah,
fact that she's such a young dragon, like they didn't know, I guess, what kind of power she would have because she wasn't supposed to
right.
bond. And so
Mhm.
her stopping time, like I thought that was gonna be a forever thing though.
Yeah. So like later on we find out it'll change or that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
always going to be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Um
that was a cool
but yeah,
moment.
so
Yes.
crazy. Yeah, it was so intense. Like you said, Jen, my heart was racing this whole time
It
during the
was
scene.
racing so fast.
But I specifically really like what happened afterwards because then in the morning, Xaden brings it up like, okay, we have 6 first years that attacked a writer
Mhm.
in her sleep, which is against Codex.
Mhm.
And then they ask her to name who it was that let them into her dorm.
Yeah, that was a huge moment. So whenever Violet does tell Xaden about the person who let the unbonded in, he immediately believed her because he immediately took action
Yeah.
against this person. But the person who didn't believe her was Dane. And so like
Her
that
best
was like
friend.
another chink in the armor where it's like you first of all you're telling me that you would never save me, like you would never break codex to save me or to help me, and now you don't believe me, like your best friend, somebody that you
Yeah.
grew up with, like not even just best
And
friend,
not
like they grew up
only,
together.
yeah,
Yeah.
not only did he not believe her, he demanded to see her memories because he didn't believe her. Because remember, he can read people's
That's
memories and he
right,
demanded that she share her memories with him
in front of
instead of just
everyone.
believing her. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Which is
was
so fucked up.
pissed. I was pissed that he was being like that because I'm just like, seriously, dude, you have no faith in this person that you say you grew up with, that you say you're trying to save, that you are, trying to get out of the writer's quadrant into the scribe quadrant because you want to save her. This person that you consider your best friend because, your parents put you guys together and you don't believe her. If you guys were ever to tell me anything, I'd be like, damn, I wouldn't even doubt it for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I was really pissed about that, but it just made me fall in love with Zayn more. And then the fact that it was Amber, I was like, that
Mhm.
bitch, man. I can't believe she did that. And her
Yeah.
reasoning behind it, saying that she was doing
Because of Gauntlet. Yeah.
yes. And that
Mhm.
I was mad, man. I was like, seriously? But I
Which is
loved it.
crazy and hypocritical, right? Because she was so about doing the right thing
Right.
at
Following
Gauntlet
the
that she
rules.
would break Codex
Mhm.
to take her out.
She
What?
Yeah.
felt justified though. She felt justified. So because she felt
No,
justified in
crazy.
doing that, she didn't feel like she was breaking codex,
Yeah. Which is, I mean,
It's
Twisted.
just
whatever mental
incredibly
gymnastics you're
ironic.
doing right now does not
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah.
I loved it when Taryn came down and killed her ass. Roasted her
Yeah.
ass.
It was perfect.
It was so great. Like I said, there were just so many key moments like Xaden like stepping in to help and save Violet that just made me fall more in love with him. And so after this, after the whole attack to her, yes, he became a little overprotective and, he tried to kind of keep his distance, but their relationship really blossomed after that. And she started admitting that she had feelings for him. And she started admitting to herself that she wanted to get closer to him. And it got to the point where, when they shared their first kiss, like he finally admitted, no, I'm not going to kill you. Like that's done. That's gone.
Like a really good example of a slow burn romance, because at this point we're well over halfway through the book and before these admissions of feelings start coming about. And I think like it's a really good payoff, right? It's a well thought out relationship as far as the writing goes. I think it's really, really well done and, angsty in all the right places and happy in all the right places. So I think it's really enjoyable to read.
I was going to say, apart from fantasy, another huge genre that I love reading are romances. And so slow burns are definitely my favorite. I love the anticipation of where a relationship is going. I love the anticipation of of when it's finally going to happen. Because I mean, like we've said plenty of times, we knew this was going to happen, but it's like when it did happen, it still felt very electrifying, and I felt all giddy and giggly when they kissed because it's just like yes, like finally it happened, like they gave into each
Yeah.
other, and so I really appreciated just how slow of a burn it was, and I after that it was just like if I were Violet, I would not be able to keep my hands off of Xaden. Especially after all of their little sparring matches that they have and the way he's been
Yeah.
training her and helping her. And so I'm just like, yes, yes, yes to all of those things. I love their
Yeah.
bond. I love that they can speak to each other in their bond. And I love that down the I love that down the like a few chapters later, they get very dirty with it. And I'm just like, yes, I can appreciate having those little secretive moments to each other because nobody else knows that they're saying these things to each other. And so, like, to me,
Yeah, that's
that makes
funny.
it a lot more. But, like,
Well,
I
it's
was just like,
intimate.
yeah, intimate.
Like
Great.
they're
Yes.
sharing
Thank
an
you.
intimate moment. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes, I acted like, like I would just giggle to myself. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe she just said that to him in front of all these people. Oh, man. But I would say the two biggest things that was a shocker to me was Violet's signet and the way this, yeah, shocker, the way this book ended, because I
Yes.
absolutely did not see the ending coming. But her signet,
No.
I didn't like, honestly, I couldn't figure out what she was going to be or what her power
Same.
was going to be. So the fact that she's a lightning wielder and it's like
Mhm.
one of the most powerful signets, like even better than the shadow signet, like holy, I
Mhm.
mean, back to what you were saying, Ethan, about the fact that it's like, are we going to go with the irony and, make Violet bond with the biggest, strongest dragon? She has the she has the deadliest signet and she hates it.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting because like I thought that they were going to do something predictable, like something to do with knowledge or something with intellect,
Mhm.
but this is so out of left field, and it
Yes.
doesn't feel very Violet. But I feel like that's going to be part of her character development, you
Yeah.
know?
I think, yeah, that's a great point because it doesn't feel like her at all. Like it's
No.
so
Yeah.
outside of her own comfort zone, which is probably why she hates
Right.
it, right? But like personal note for me is I loved everything magic about this book. I loved, all the shadow wielding with Zayden. I loved, of course the lightning. It automatically
Mhm.
made me think of Storm from X-Men, right? Like that's my favorite X-Men
Oh,
character.
yeah.
And that's what I was picturing in my brain the whole time. I was like, yes, I was so excited.
Right. That's so cool.
And honestly, and I know this comes down to when we kind of get into Iron Flame, when we start talking about like other people's signets a little more, but
Mhm.
Rebecca did a great job with like the different signets and the different magic that she includes in her books. And it's not just
Yeah,
regular like
that's right.
telekinesis or, being able to
Mhm.
teleport either. No, she really brings out some incredible powers and incredible magic that she pulls into these dragons. And the fact
And it
that they
has to
have to
do with something
wield,
to the character.
yeah, and it
Mhm.
has to do with what the character yeah, you're right. Like it has to do with the characters and like their dragons and their bonds. And so it's really cool that they get the powers from the dragon
Mhm.
and that only dragon riders have powers like that.
What I love about that too is that she has to earn that. It's not just given to her. Like she goes through the ringer to be able to get there. And
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it even more believable and compelling to read.
Well, and her dragons had to make sure she was ready for that too. So, I mean,
Right.
her character development proved and her confidence that, that was growing every day with her abilities and the fact that she was training with Zayden. That's what finally got her to, like what you said, she had to earn it. That's what finally got her to that point where she was with her dragons. Both her dragons had to agree, okay, she's ready.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's funny because that like they set it up like she was up against some sort of ticking time bomb, right? Because
Oh yeah.
if you don't manifest within a certain amount of time, you could essentially burn out. And
Yeah.
so that kind of added a layer of anxiety to like, oh my gosh, she has to manifest her signet like today.
Yes.
And then the way that it manifested, she wielded lightning to take down Jack Barlow and kill him. You know, you said it before, Ethan, like she hated it because she's not a killer. Yeah, she wanted to be a writer, but like she's very against killing. Like she resisted killing Orin during threshing.
Mm-hmm.
And then now her signet is super violent and can really only be used to kill, you know?
Right.
And so she is very torn up about that. Like
And Jack was her
that's
first
part of
kill.
her identity. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Dane being freaking Dane. Oh, you don't have to use it if you don't want to use it. Are you kidding me, dude? Like,
And
if
like,
you
yeah, she
Yeah,
knew
does.
what
That's
was,
a part
obviously
of her.
this is going to be used. Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
if he knew what
Yeah.
was out
Like he's
there,
just constantly trying to dim her light, literally.
yeah, no,
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
agreed. But I mean, this kind of goes into what the ending of the book was. Like, if he knew what was out there, if he knew the real wars that they were fighting, he wouldn't tell her not to use that signet.
Yeah.
He wouldn't try to bring her down and not boost her up and build her confidence. Like, he doesn't know that, all of these folklores that she was reading and all these mythical things and stuff that she read as a kid were actually real because after, what is it, during war games, like, she joins Xaden and his squad out to, I think it's called Athbean. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where they got sent.
And so they get sent there, and she finds out that not only was Xaden lying to her, but like all of leadership in Navarre were keeping this huge secret that the war is not against the Flyers, it's against Venin and Wyvern. And so that, to me, I was just like, wait, what? So
Yeah,
when I
that
got
was like a huge plot twist. Well, like not even just that, in that moment, she had to come to terms with everything that she knew about the country she grew up in and like the war that is supposedly going on is a lie.
Mhm.
And also, Xaden is leading a rebellion that she had no idea about. So it's
Yeah.
like
And
all of these
it's
betrayals. And it's not just that. Dane has been reading her memories without her consent this whole time. So, like, strike
ugh,
number 3 for their friendship, right?
Oh yeah.
yes.
That's so much to confront all in one scene.
Oh,
Yes. Like the anger that I felt
I
in that
know.
moment, I was like, oh, like my hatred for Dane at that point rivaled my hatred for Jack Barlow. But
Totally.
no, I think this is a great moment. Like all of these different plot twists coming at this moment is another point of how well it was written, because if these little seeds hadn't been planted throughout the whole book, it would have very much felt like the rug was pulled out from under us and the author was lying to us
Mhm.
this whole time.
Mhm.
And just bam, all of a sudden we're going in this direction when,
Yeah.
we hadn't been prepared for that at all. But subliminally, we had been preparing for this
Mhm.
moment.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, she was
that's what I
leaving the
really appreciated.
breadcrumbs throughout. Yeah.
Yes. And like
Because, yeah.
I appreciated being kept in the dark at that point. I was like, "Oh, that's very clever. I
Mhm.
like this big reveal." Whereas it can feel very cheap very easily.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I was actually, I felt very, yes, the Dane thing, I was pissed. I was very upset. I was like, I cannot believe he just sent them in there because of what he did. And, of course, leadership being leadership, trying to hide everything. But I felt so betrayed by Xaden. Like, I was rooting for
Really?
him. Yes, I was like, I understand. Okay, I understand. I get it. And like, and I promise you, once we talk about Iron Flame, I'll talk more about why I agree with Xaden then. But at that moment, it's like, okay, they finally had kind of given themselves a chance to be together. They finally decided to be a couple, even though, they're both kind of hesitant in the beginning and knowing that they are going to be bonded forever. So that was a huge jump for them to take. And so the fact that she did that and then she found out this huge betrayal, I'm just like, I was really upset with Zadie. I was like, you kept this whole secret. Like, again, I will talk about an Iron Flame, how I agree with him, but for a Fourth Wing, I just did not agree with the way that it went down. And I felt for Violet. I felt for the heartbreak she was going through because not only, like you guys mentioned, not only was she going through heartbreak for that, but for also Dane and for also like her country. Like you said, she was going through so many emotions. And then to be revealed that her brother that she thought was dead was actually alive. And he's the one that's been leading this freaking rebellion too. And so I'm just like, oh my God, what more can this girl find out? Like,
Yeah, that was
I
such an
was just
insane ending. Like, oh, on top of all of that, as if that wasn't enough, her brother's not dead, and he's part of
Yeah,
the rebellion.
I thought it was actually going to be her father that was revealed. Like I
Oh,
could
that would have been
sense like a reveal
crazy.
was coming, but I
Yeah,
thought it was going to be the dad just because of like the breadcrumbs that were being left, right?
oh
Like
yeah.
the
mhm.
myths that she was reading. And I was like, "Oh, he's
Right,
still
yeah,
talking to
and
her.
that
Oh, he's
note in
alive."
the
Like,
book.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, and she almost
but
died too. So putting on top of all that, that she just got revealed and then she almost dies.
right.
Poor Violet.
So I feel like I was more on Zayden's side at this point, just considering the fact that he knew that Dane was probably reading her memories. Like he
Yes.
could not
Yeah.
risk that. Yes, I do agree that he could have told her or warned her about Dane, and she probably would have like been
Protected
more
herself.
careful around him.
Yeah.
But I just I just don't know that Zayden was able to risk that at that point. So I wasn't as mad at Zayden for that. I felt
Yeah.
like she was
Same.
giving him way too hard of a time for it.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
oh,
But
I'm more in
I do
Steph's camp
see her
there.
perspective. Yeah, I do see her perspective where literally her country's been lying to her, her parents were probably lying to her, her best friend betrayed her. She can't trust anybody, and the only
her
person that she can
brother.
take it out on is Zayden. Like that's the
Yeah.
only person that she can react to, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember reading that last chapter, the last battle in front of Ethan, because he's like, okay, you're at the last chapter. You need to read it right now so we can talk about it. And I did. I read it right in front of him and I was like, what? I was like, Brennan's alive. And he just looks at me and like smiles. I was like, what?
Yeah. So I went back
I
through like
forgot
all
about
my
that.
texts to you, Jen, as like from back when I read it, and I saw that text to you as I finished it. It was like, freaking Brandon,
Yes, man. Brennan,
just all
dude.
caps.
Yes.
Freaking Brandon. Oh my God. Did either of y'all start to spiral about Dane and like how much he did or didn't know at this point? Because
Yes.
I was thinking like, oh my gosh, he is okay. So right before they left to go to Athbane, he told Violet, "I'll miss you."
Yes.
So
Yes.
then fast forward to
Them
we
almost
know
dying.
that that mission was a death mission
Yeah.
and that he's been reading her memories.
And he sent her to
That made
die.
me start to, yeah, that made me start to think like, does he know about Venin? Does he know that she was potentially going to die? Like all of these things. Is he part of this whole corrupt plot to keep Venin a secret? It's so
Mhm.
crazy.
So that's going to wrap up our discussion here, but I want to leave us with one very important thought, right? It's crucial to the story. We all know that this is not a young adult book like that I figured out with some very blush-worthy scenes. And I would ask the question, would you have enjoyed this book as much as you did without the spice? And I'll go first. For me, yes, I still would have enjoyed this book because the magic is still there. The dragons, of course, are still there. And I think the relationship building outside of Violet and Xaden, like her and Rhiannon, of course Liam and all of the other characters, I think those are such solid relationships built. That's why I enjoy reading a good book, not just, for a maybe a main romance, but also all the side characters as well and the political scheming and all of that. I think That's what makes a good book. And if your book is only resting on spice, then it's probably not so solid outside of that. So yeah, I would have enjoyed the book. But what about y'all?
Yeah, yes. Okay, that was a solid yes. I still would have read the book if it did not have spice. But what I would say is that I would hope it still had the intimacy of what their relationship was. I wouldn't want to get rid of their relationship at all. Like, could we have done without the scenes and the book would have still been amazing? Absolutely. Did those scenes make my cheeks really red and I giggled every time I read them? Absolutely as well. So so I really enjoyed reading those scenes, but the book itself is amazing. I mean, like I said, or like Ethan already said, the magic, the world building, being able to imagine yourself there and knowing that you can easily do that, like the author's doing a great job. And so I could have easily read it without the spice scenes, and I would have still read it had she told or had it been mentioned that there were no spice scenes in the second and third book. But I'm glad that they still have them. Stephanie, what do you think?
For me, yeah, hot take. I feel like their first sex scene was so cheesy and over the top. Like the first piece of furniture breaking, fine, I'll give that to you. The third, what is it? Was it four pieces of furniture breaking? Come on. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. That doesn't even sound enjoyable at that point, I would definitely still enjoy the story without the spice. I think there's still plenty to go off of without it, and it's not all about the spice, which I really super appreciate. Obviously, it's
Yeah.
fun, but like Ethan said, if you're just resting on the spice to keep people interested, then what are we doing?
All right, everyone. Well, that wraps up this recap episode of Fourth Wing. Our next episode is going to be another recap episode, and we're going to dive into Iron Flame. And then after that, we're going to have a series of episodes devoted to Onyx Storm, and you're going to get our reactions to several chapters at a time per episode in real time. So you can react right along with us, read along with us. We would love that as well.
All right, y'all. We've soared with dragons. We have unraveled some really big secrets, and we have survived some deadly trials in Fourth Wing. But the story is far from over. Next week, we are diving into the explosive sequel, Iron Flame, where the stakes are higher, the betrayals cut deeper, and the battles push Violet and her dragons to the edge. Get ready for shocking twists, fiery action, and even more of that slow burn tension we can't get enough of. Trust us on this one. You don't want to miss it.
And that's a wrap for Books Between Friends today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next chapter.